them to address the problem of reading and reading with understanding, especially among South African pupils who are in our schooling system. Several organizations have come on board to help. The 2021 Progress in International Reading Literacy study reveals that 81% of grade 4 pupils cannot read for meaning by the time they end the foundation phase. For more on this, we're joined now by attorney and co-lead for education programs at the Legal Resource Center, Mcconnachie. Cameron, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. I remember a couple of months ago, maybe now, when that report was still doing the rounds at the degree and the level at which our learners are able to read with understanding. The Minister of Basic Education said, as a remedy, parents must stop buying your kids toys. Buy them books. You know, instead when you go there and they want this toy, say, no, not going to get this toy, but I'm going to buy you this book. Is it as simple as that, the work that we need to be doing?
I'm afraid not. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. I'm not saying that what the minister suggests. I think that's a good idea. I think more books in the homes is fantastic and should be encouraged. But no, it's not that simple. So this campaign is being launched to call on the minister to adopt binding regulations. And the regulations, we think, should at a minimum focus on 4 things. And really, they're known as, in various circles, the 4 T's. But really what they stand for is teaching, text, time, and testing. And there may be debates within each of those, but just generally, roughly what they say, what we think is that there needs to be better focus on teaching, training teachers really well so that they are experts in teaching literacy. Secondly, we think that the minister acknowledges that we need more texts, but we don't only need them in the home, we need them in the schools as well. So there needs to be a minimum amount of text readings, readers, etc., that are in the classrooms. A specific amount of time needs to be spent on literacy in the classrooms, and we think that the curriculum needs to be looked at, and we need to increase the amount of time that's spent there. Obviously, that might mean there may need to be some trade-offs, so it's not an easy thing to just change overnight, but I think that discussion needs to be had. Yeah. And then the last thing, we have these PROLS results, and so that was because of a test that was done. But that test is only done every 5 years. So we're calling on regulations that include assessments that happen regularly, standardized assessments that can help teachers, parents, schools understand where the children are at, and not just something that we get every 5 years and a big shock to the system.
So let's go a little bit slow to that and look a little bit more about what you're recommending there. Let's talk about teachers, because that's one of the things that I heard one of the experts said is that, of course, there needs to be a degree of retraining of our teachers. What does that in practice actually mean? Because the teachers would have qualified, 20, 15 years ago. They're teaching languages in our schools currently. What would they need to be doing, and where would we be getting that particular program that they need to be engaging with?
So I think there's 2 parts to that. One is the pre-service, and as you know, so there are teachers that are still being trained at universities, and there needs to be a serious look at what that program looks like. I think that discussion has begun. But I think the universities themselves are acknowledging that what teachers are the training that teachers are receiving at the moment is not sufficient. But for the tens of thousands of teachers that are already in the system, that training, there are courses that have been designed and developed for in-service training, which focus on literacy. And really improve the teaching pedagogy of teachers. Some of those courses, I know that Rhodes University has an advanced certificate in literacy, and it's that sort of program that needs to be funded at a level where it can be taken to scale. We're not saying that that's as easy or it's going to happen overnight, but we need a firm commitment to make sure that it happens, and we need to put some sort of a price tag on it so we know what it's going to cost, and then we need to start finding the money.
So my understanding is that maybe it could mean some regulation put in place in how it's going to be carried out, but most importantly, you are looking to say the minister must set aside money, put a budget to it to say this is the money that's going to be put aside to go and retrain our teachers in this particular way.
Yeah, I think, look, we've still got a lot of work to do as a campaign and as developing the regulations. And there needs to be a lot of discussion about what that would look like and what those, the nuts and bolts of it. But yes, certainly there will be a price tag attached to it. And I think we need to think constructively about how that can be financed. Yeah. I'm sure that there are partnerships that could be entered into. I think we might need to ask other organizations to assist, but we need to treat it like the crisis that it is. And when there's a crisis, you need to make a plan.
Yeah. I remember when I was in high school, primary school, which was many years ago, we used to have libraries. We used to have a system of taking out books and bringing them back in and so on and so forth. I know there are civil society organizations that have seen a lack of libraries, especially in township schools, and they've been doing all sorts of fundraising to help. Of course, it's a tip of the iceberg what they've been able to do. I think one of the issues when you're saying text, I'm presuming that you're saying there needs to be a degree of readily available material, particularly at our schools. So a huge drive to bring back those libraries.
Correct. So that's one part of it. But I think almost at a more granular level in the classrooms, there need to be certain materials. And so yes, some of those are storybooks. But it's also about graded readers, so that you're working through a series of books. It's about having big books for the teacher to read from and small books for the learners. And I'm not a literacy. Well, I was a teacher, but I'm not a teacher anymore. And I wasn't a foundation phase teacher. But there are lots of resources, and there's actually quite a broad agreement on what those materials should be. The government, the Department of Basic Education did gazette guidelines, I think it's close to 15 years ago, with what those texts should be. And we haven't moved that far away from what those are. But we just need to change it from being a guideline to being something that definitely has to happen.
So in terms of time, I mean, we know around about this time we're going to hear a lot of information, a lot of PR around projects that are aimed at literacy, because it is that type of month. But when you're saying time, I'm sure you're talking about a focus that is a little bit more than just a month or a week that is dedicated to literacy.
Yeah, correct. So the national curriculum statement sets out what teachers should do in terms of dividing the time in the class time up between life skills, mathematics, and literacy. And we've looked at what's happening in other countries, other jurisdictions, and there's some debate within South Africa. And I think there's some acknowledgement now that we need to, without literacy, it's like you can't go any further. It's like you can't do your maths because you can't read the questions. You can't really get engaged with all of the other subjects because you can't read what's in the book. So we do need to make sure that children can read for meaning by the age of 10, by the end of grade 3, when they're reaching grade 4. So we probably need to shift the time that's spent on these different subjects to make sure that literacy it's a done deal by the time you're 10 years old. Yeah. So yes, it's talking about how much time is spent in the classroom and how it's spent.
One would look at this, Cameron, and say, I've read your statement. I'm not seeing a lot of it, but maybe it could be implied. What's the degree of technological intervention in how this system is recalibrated and changed?
Yeah, I think that, look, I know that there's place and space for technology in the system, and I think the department is looking at that. But I think, you know, we shouldn't get caught up too much in that. I think that there's a very basic level of things that can happen without too much technology. Wherever it can be used, wherever it's accessible, completely support it. I know that there's many creative ways to bring it into the classroom, and completely support that. But I do think that there's still something to be said to just getting the very basics right, for learning how to read the way that you learned how to read and the way that I learned how to read, which was without much technology, if any.
Yeah. So you speak of the assessment and the regularity thereof in terms of assessing our systems and assessing whether it is actually responding to the kind of challenge that we are having. But is that assessment also maybe required to be extended maybe also to the participant in the program, to the learners themselves, and how they are being assessed, their regularity of being assessed, so that we don't have to wait for 10 years again to learn that we're actually doing a bad job at this?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it. You've said it correctly. We need to be testing our children. We need to be assessing them to see who can read and who can't read, and there's a whole a level of testing that takes place at each stage of learning how to read. It starts with, can you identify the letters? Do you know that that's a p sound and that's a t sound? So you assess them. Can they identify the words? And then it builds. Can they identify? Can they put sentences together? And how quickly can they read sentences? So there's a lot of research and there's a science which I don't know enough about to really say too much, except that we do know that we don't, at the moment, we're almost flying blind. We don't know which children can read and how well they can read and where the problems are. So with regular testing, which is not to be punitive, we're not trying to, if we find that, the department's shouldn't be trying to catch teachers out. It should be trying to help them use assessment to identify children that are struggling and bring them up to speed as quickly as possible. And not only just when they get to the end of grade 3, but rather, as they move through the system at the end, even I think it's, grade 1, you need to be knowing, oh, so-and-so is falling behind. We need to bring them up to speed.
Right. Cameron, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. Cameron Mcconnachie, the attorney and co-lead for the education program at Legal Resource Center.